Before the first breath of creation stirred, before the titans rose, before even light dared to name itself, there was a presence woven from pure eternity, a shadow older than the sky, older than time, older than every god who would one day fear her. In the silence before existence, she moved, and the cosmos learned the meaning of night. Welcome back to Legends Reborn. Tonight we step beyond the edge of recorded myth, into the primordial darkness where the oldest truths still whisper. Join me as we descend into the forgotten origins, the Orphic mysteries, and the eternal shadow of the first night herself. This is the complete story of Nyx. In the earliest layers of Greek thought, long before classical temples rose, long before philosophers searched for meaning, there existed a simple, ancient cosmology. This was the worldview of the early Archaic period, an age when poets were the first historians, and myth was the only language capable of describing the universe. And in their oldest surviving vision of creation, the world began not with gods, nor with matter, nor with light, but with chaos, a vast, unbounded expanse where nothing yet held shape. It was within this primordial vision, formed in the centuries before Homer sang his epics, that Nyx first appeared. She did not explode into existence. She rose from chaos the way a horizon rises from the sea, slowly, inevitably, defining the very space she entered. Nyx was one of the protogenoi, the firstborn forces of reality itself. To those early Greek storytellers, she was not a deity who acted inside the cosmos. She was a deity who preceded it. Night existed before sky, before earth, before the laws that would one day bind gods and mortals alike. In this archaic imagination, Nyx was the oldest presence the world had ever known. Her emergence gave the cosmos its first contrast, its first boundary, its first breath of structure. The poets never dared describe her appearance. To do so would be to confine something older than imagination. Instead, they spoke of her with a reverence that bordered on caution, a reminder that certain forces should remain unshaped. From the same primordial darkness rose Erebus, the deep shadow that follows night. And in the earliest theogonies, their meeting sparked the first movement of the universe. Out of their union came Ether and Hemera, light and day, figures who appear in myths older than the classical gods, older even than the Titans. This was not a victory of light over darkness, but a recognition. There can be no dawn without a night from which to rise. As Greek myth matured through the Homeric age, Nyx's influence deepened. She became the wellspring of the intangible forces that would shape the mortal condition. The Greeks understood that the oldest goddess could not bear children in the mortal sense. She brought forth powers, not bodies, the hidden structures beneath human experience. From her came Hypnos, the soft pull of sleep that settles over the world at dusk, and Thanatos, death itself, quiet and patient, walking at the edge of every mortal path. The Oneiroi, the dreams, flowed from her shadow in shifting forms, carrying visions across the frontier between life and sleep. Nemesis moved behind her, a silent force ensuring that every act eventually met its balance. Moros, the creeping sense of inescapable fate, stirred where destiny tightened its grip. And from the deepest folds of her being came the Moirai, the Fates, who spun and measured every life with a precision even Zeus could not overrule. These were not merely supernatural children, they were the scaffolding of existence. Nyx was not the absence of light. She was the architect of everything that light would one day reveal. By the time Hesiod wrote the Theogony in the late Archaic period, roughly the 7th century before Common Era, the myth of Nyx had become foundational. Hesiod placed her far from Olympus, in a region beyond the known cosmos, where day and night passed one another at a single threshold. Nyx withdrew just as Hemera stepped into the world. Hemera returned just as Nyx rose again. Their exchange became the earliest explanation of time itself, not measured by clocks or calendars, but by the rhythm of two ancient forces trading places at the edge of creation. It is also in this period that a striking truth emerges. In Homer's epics, revered in the Homeric world of the 8th century before a common era, even the mightiest god hesitates before Nyx. When Hypnos hid beneath her wings after deceiving Zeus, the king of the gods halted his wrath, not out of forgiveness, not out of doubt, but because he feared to offend Night. This single moment clarifies the cosmic hierarchy the early Greeks understood intuitively. The Olympians ruled the world, but Nyx ruled the conditions that allowed that world to exist. Yet centuries later, during the rise of the Orphic tradition, roughly between the 6th and 4th centuries before Common Era, her myth transformed again. In these mystical hymns and esoteric teachings, Nyx was no longer simply the night that fell. She was the first mind to awaken in chaos, the keeper of the cosmic egg from which Phanes, the radiant creator, would emerge. She was the mother of gods who would shape the universe, the guardian of hidden wisdom, the oracle whose voice whispered even to Zeus as he sought to claim his place as king. In the Orphic worldview, Nyx becomes nothing less than the engine of creation, the force that precedes order, nurtures it, and remains after all other gods fade from glory. And so, from the earliest age of Greek imagination to the mystical philosophies that followed, Nyx stands unchanged in one respect. She is the first boundary, the first presence, the first truth the universe ever learned. Night was here before the world took form, and in the quiet places where memory cannot reach, she still is. By the time Greek religion reached the classical age, the world of myth had already begun to expand beyond its archaic roots. The Olympians rose to prominence, philosophers questioned the old stories, and cities like Athens shaped new understandings of fate, justice, and the cosmos. Yet in all this cultural refinement, Nyx remained something older, something untouched. She did not belong to the temples of marble or to the political gods who ruled city-states. She belonged to a deeper memory, one that stretched back to the earliest cosmological imagination. But myths migrate as cultures shift, and when the Greek world gave way to the expanding power of Rome in the Hellenistic and early imperial eras, Nyx crossed into a new identity. In Roman thought, she became Nox, and her presence deepened into something heavier, more foreboding. Roman poets living in an empire built on conquest saw the night not only as mystery, but as inevitability. They imagined her chariot racing across the sky with restless horses, her cloak dragging the stars behind her like embers drifting from a dying fire. In the Roman mindset, Nox was the silent force reminding emperors and generals that even their glory bowed to the darkness at the end of every day. Yet this Roman reinterpretation only hinted at her true antiquity. Meanwhile, a different transformation was unfolding during the late Hellenistic and early late Antique periods, one that would bring Nyx into the realm of philosophy. As Greek thinkers like Proclus and Damascius shaped the last great wave of pagan philosophy in the Neoplatonic era, they sought to understand the universe through layers of metaphysical principles rather than narrative myth. And in their writings, Nyx rose again, not as a figure of fear or beauty, but as a cosmic mother, essential to the structure of existence itself. These philosophers described her as the nurse of creation, the presence who guarded the earliest powers of the cosmos. Within their hierarchies of being, Nyx stood at the threshold between the unmanifest and the manifest, the bridge linking chaos to ordered creation. She sheltered the luminous Phanes, the firstborn deity of the Orphic mysteries, and served as the keeper of the primordial oracle that whispered truth to the gods. To the Neoplatonists, night was not the absence of light. Night was the origin of knowing, the place where the mind first encountered truth in its raw, undivided form. Then came an extraordinary rediscovery, one that reshaped modern understanding of early Greek religion, the Derveni Papyrus, a text dating to the late classical or early Hellenistic period. In its brittle, preserved lines, scholars found a Nyx older than philosophy itself, a Nyx who instructed Zeus, who stood at the center of a cosmic drama that predated the Olympians. She was the mother of Uranus, the counselor of the gods, the voice that shaped the earliest acts of creation. This papyrus confirmed what the Orphics had long suggested. Nyx was not peripheral, she was foundational. But the ancient world collapsed, empires fell, Christianity rose, and mythology slipped from religion into memory. Yet even when the Olympians faded, Nyx did not vanish. She simply changed the realm in which she was understood. During the medieval centuries, when Europe reinterpreted old pagan stories through the lens of Christian theology and occult speculation, Nyx transformed into a symbolic figure, representing the threshold between the visible and the hidden. Scholars writing grimoires and mystical treatises began to associate her with the secretive aspects of the feminine divine, with the forces that dwell in dreams, shadows, and liminal spaces. She entered the imagination of mystics as the archetype of night itself, the quiet, dangerous, introspective force that reveals truth only to those who dare to look inward. And when the early modern period brought a rebirth of classical learning, her presence flickered again. Artists, poets, and occult philosophers rediscovered her as a symbol of the subconscious, the unknown, the unspoken. In their eyes, Nyx embodied the tension between fear and fascination, the same tension humanity had felt when looking into the nighttime sky thousands of years before. But it was not until the rise of modern psychology that Nyx gained a new and unexpected relevance. Thinkers exploring the human mind saw in her the perfect symbol of the unconscious, the part of the psyche where forgotten memories sink, where dreams take shape, where instinct, intuition, and inner darkness coexist. Nyx became the emblem of the shadow self, not as something evil, but as something essential, the place where transformation begins. And as the modern world grew louder, brighter, and more restless, people found themselves returning to the very thing civilization had long tried to push away, the quiet of the night. Nyx lived in the insomnia of crowded cities, in the glow of screens watched long after midnight, in the anxious thoughts that rise when the world falls silent. She lived in the fascination with stars, the comfort of darkness, the allure of the unexplained. Her presence became cultural rather than religious, a symbol woven through literature, art, and the modern imagination. Even today, in an age of technology and light, Nyx remains a reminder of every truth the Greeks felt in their bones. That darkness is not an end, it is a beginning, a space for reflection, for dreaming, for facing oneself without distraction. She teaches that light and shadow are not enemies, but companions, that existence moves in cycles, that every story alternates between revelation and obscurity. And in that rhythm, as old as the cosmos, night still breathes. Nyx was first. Nyx remains. And as long as humanity turns its gaze toward the dark, seeking meaning, rest, fear, and wonder, the first night will never fade from the world. This is Legends Reborn, where the past still breathes. If you enjoyed this story and stayed with me until the end, feel free to explore the rest of the channel. Leave a comment about what you loved, or even what you didn't. Every insight helps me grow, refine, and bring these legends back to life with even greater clarity. Your voice shapes this journey, and you are always welcome here.